Today I'm going to be telling you how to engage kids who are ordinarily tricky to engage. Now, I'm going to focus on the literacy side of things because that's usually when they pop up on your radar. So, first things first, we use decodable readers. Now what happens is these kids start to fall through the cracks. They're still on these emergent readers, and let's face it, they're rather dull. If the content of the books is dull, it's going to be really, really hard to get them to read for you. I like to use, there is the Talisman, Totem and Magic Belt series. They're fantasy based with cool monsters that they battle, but the key is that everything in there is able to be sounded out. Not only is it interesting, but it increases their confidence, so reading becomes more enjoyable. There's other programs like the Spellphabet, also the Alpha to Omega series. Once you've got them to a point where they are reading with confidence, we really need to support them with their sight words. I've got heaps of games that I find really, really effective to use. Quite often the kids who are falling through the cracks tend to be boys, and boys tend to be competitive, but let's face it, most humans are. The first game I will tell you about is Charlie of the Ocean. Now that's where you've got two kids in the middle. The words are on the ground facing them, so they've got a set each. And you sing Charlie of the ocean, Charlie of the sea, come back Charlie and find for me, and you'll call out the word. Now the first one to put their foot on the word is the winner. The other person sits down and you move really quickly around the circle. Initially when you play, sure, you can get some kids who chuck a wobbly. That's to be expected. But once they cotton on that there's going to be someone who loses each time, it moves around the circle really fast, and they're going to get another turn. So there's no point in having a wobbly. And then I find that they're so determined to be the carryover champion at the end of it. And so just purely by the motivation of competition, they are memorizing those sight words. Now, another one is Silent Ninja, where you have someone out the front. You can have just the cards on the floor. The idea is that the kids sneak up and they're trying to take as many of these words as they can, but the person out the front is closing their eyes or they're blindfolded. If they can hear you, they call out Silent Ninja, and then they've got to go back to the start and they've got to drop anything that they've got, and they literally love it. Now at the end of the game, they have to be able to read the words in order to be able to keep them. You can do some movement games outside or inside really. There are ones a bit like musical chairs where you have got the cards of the different sight words on the ground, and once the music stops, they have to get onto one of the words, but in order to stay on the word, they have to be able to read the word. If they can't read the word, then they have to sit down. That's another good one. You can do some running style games where I'll call out a word and they have to run to it, or I can use coloured code. So I might just call out the colour, but they've got to run to the colour and then they've got to call out the word. Another one you can do is a bit like hopscotch, where you've got the sight words in each of the squares. So you can do things like bingo and beanbag toss. You can do, if you're allowed to use super soakers, they can be really cool because you can go outside. Kids love the fact that they're getting to use these super soakers, but in order to soak something, they've got to say the word and then they squirt it. You can do that. The kids absolutely love that one. That's really, really popular. You can do them fishing style. So you can have basically bamboo rods that have got a magnet on some string, and then you've got each of the sight words on a paper clip, and then they've got to go fishing for them. So many different ones that you can do with kids just to make it fun. Because I really believe that if it's not fun, then they're not going to be motivated. These are kids who the teacher's probably tried everything and sort of at the end of their tether. So you need to be a little bit more creative. But I can't stress enough that the competition style ones are super effective. Okay, so now you've got the decodable readers, you've got their sight words going, but you really want to work on that expression and the fluency of things. So I like to use readers theatre. Readers theatre can be super fun. Kids don't find it as confronting because they're not sitting down and reading one-on-one, or they're not reading in the group, they're performing it. A lot of the kids will really go up in their levels of reading purely because they're using an interesting voice. They're learning how to be storytellers. There's heaps on the internet of different scripts you can use. I personally love using Roald Dahl. So I will use things like revolting rhymes and convert it to my own script. Then we're going to tackle the writing. So this is the tricky one, and this is the bit that most of the kids balk at. So where do you start? My advice is it is a 3-step approach. Firstly, we deal with something that they already love. Whether they're into cars or dinosaurs, it can be vampires. I don't really mind what they choose, as long as it's interesting to them and they are going to be happy to research more and share what they already know. They are engaged because they already love it. So I would personally start with a project where it's a little bit less confronting. They get to find some fun pictures, and you might do something like fun facts, if you like. So there's not a lot of content, but they're at least engaged. The next step would be to do some report writing. So you're going to take them through that procedure. So we've got the report, something that they're interested in. The next step is to do an introduction to persuasive writing. This is based on the premise of who would win. I choose this because I find that kids are very animated when I propose to them. Now, it could be like 2 dinosaurs that would fight, or it could be, I don't know, Batman versus Superman. It could be anything. The last one that we did was 2 different sorts of Godzillas that would fight. So you decide on who would win. Then you're going to take them through formulating their argument. You can scribe this for them initially, and then you're going to take them through their evidence. So the persuasive writing, we're going to have an introduction. 3 pieces of evidence is what I require from them, and then their conclusion. So even if you scribe that for them first, then you can take them through the writing process so that it's already there for them. They already know what they're going to write, so it's quite easy to get them to move through it. And usually they're quite passionate about their opinion and have a willingness to share that. Okay, so now we've done a project, we have done a persuasive writing. It's time to tackle the thing that they dread the most, and that is creative writing or a narrative. Okay, now they always hate it. My approach to it is a little bit different. I do what I call pass the pen style. So you can do this in 2 different ways. You can do this as an entire group or an entire class, where it's one person's turn in each session to contribute to the story, and you can work with them one-on-one. That works really well, particularly for kids who need additional support. If you've gotten to a point where the kids are actually able to write independently, then each child can have their own story premise. For example, the one that we've just been working on, which we've done as a whole group, is a zombie apocalypse. They had to first decide what the story premise was, and then each child had to contribute a character. And in that character, they had to sort of tease out what their traits were. So were they a hero? Were they a villain? Their age? Just a little sort of backstory for the character, so we knew how to write for that person. Then each person has their turn to write. They can see what the person has written before. And I found that it goes back to this competition sort of premise. They're so eager to outdo the last person, and as long as they can change the story in a way that is logical and makes sense, but ultimately they're in charge, they can do whatever they like, and they seem to really relish in that. They love killing each other's characters off, and I mean, it's quite convoluted. Now, if you're doing it in a whole class setting where each child has come up with their own story premise, the story makes its way around, so each person in the class has contributed to every single story. So you literally put a time on the clock. So say you put 10 minutes on the clock, 15 minutes, whatever you want, and everyone writes. Maybe they have to add a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, whatever you think is reasonable. Then you pass the story on to the next person, and then that person writes, and so on and so forth. So by the time it comes back to the original person who came up with the story premise, they can see what the class has written on their behalf. Now, let me tell you, 9 times out of 10, they are outraged. That is not the story that they intended, and guess what happens? They then feel really fired up to write the story that they would have written. It's a really powerful technique that not only are they writing along the way and they're contributing to someone else's story, but then they've got the motivation to write their own story the way they wanted. Now we've got to deal with the comprehension side of things. I'm really into the weird and mysterious at the moment. There's lots of different levels for it, so you can pick the level that is appropriate for the kids. But what I like about it is really unusual content. So you'll find that there's things on like the Bermuda Triangle. Some of them are spooky stories. And I find that it's content that the kids are interested in and they're happy to have a little debate over. And when we get to the comprehension side of things, it's done in 3 levels. So without them even knowing, they're inferring information, or you can teach them speed scanning, so they can scan through the text and find the relevant information so they can answer the factual information. There are lots of different comprehension strategies on offer, but what I would really encourage is something that you know is going to engage them. So you really got to try to work with the strengths of the particular children that you're working with, and sometimes it's trial and error. What works with one child won't work with another. So hopefully that's giving you some strategies that you can implement in your class, or if you're a homeschooler at home, and get some improvement with your kids, because I firmly believe that all kids can succeed given the right opportunities and the right motivation and the right support. See you next time.